All right. I jumped the gun. So I said we were moving on to the ponds, and then I realized, oh no, we have one more slide dealing with not just the pyramids and the olives. We have to talk about what are these primitive functions that are controlled by the brain stem? The brain stem being the medulla oblongata and the pons. And I'd said, even reptiles and frogs have this because you have basic physiology that has to be controlled here. So some of the stuff that is going to be found or controlled by the medulla are these basic things, basic functions of life. So we said we have a cardiac center, we have a vasomotor sensor, a respiratory center. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about the rate and force of heartbeat, important for life, right? Very important for life. Adjusting the blood pressure, that's what the vasomotor center is all about. Has to do with how constricted the smooth muscle is that's around these arteries. And then the respiratory centers, the rate and depth of breathing. All these are really, really important stuff, right? So these are going to be very basic functions for life that are going to be throughout this lower part of the brain. So when we talk about these basic functions, you'll realize, like when we talk about the pons, we're going to talk about some of the same functions, and even another structure a little higher called the midbrain. So a lot of these basic functions for life are controlled throughout this brain stem. And so maybe we have some, what you might call, artificial separations in there based on morphology. We've been looking at brains for 100 years or hundreds of years, and we said, well, that's the medulla, that's the pons, that's the midbrain. And a lot of functionally, we'll talk about what they call a reticular nuclei that's going to be extending up through there, which is controlling a lot of these basic functions. Okay, so moving on. So we had said basic functions for life are controlled here in these three first lower portions of the brain. So we got this bump here. It's called the pons, and that's what we are going to be talking about next. Now, what the name pons means is crossroad. And so I had said the olives were on the pathway between the cerebrum and the cerebellum, right? Well, in order to get to the olive, you have to go through the pons. So the pons is also a place where these ascending and descending tracks pass through. It's a crossroads. So they're going to carry signals from the cerebrum to the cerebellum. It's also where signals are going to be coming up through the spinal cord, through the medulla, through the pons, and up to the thalamus, which we'll talk about. It's part of the diencephalon, one of the last things we'll talk about today. And again, we have some all these shared functions. Something that is pretty much located in a basic function that is pretty much located in the pons would be chewing and salivating. So it's important. It's not funny. It's important. Okay. All right. So if we look, I want you to look carefully at this picture here. So we have the medulla there, and we have the pons, and then sort of behind it, right there, I didn't move much, right, is what we call the midbrain. And I'd said this midbrain, pons, and medulla, we're going to have some shared functions, but we're going to talk about the midbrain first. So we have some portions of the midbrain, and so it's designed. We have a portion of it that is going to have something called the red nucleus. The red nucleus. I was looking at my picture to see where the tectum is and the tegmentum. I always forget which one is which. The tegmentum is the part that is closest to the pons. So if we look at the midbrain, you can see the midbrain is on both sides of the cerebral aqueduct. So we have the fourth ventricle here, and we have this midbrain, and between, going down the middle of it, is the cerebral aqueduct, which connects up to the third ventricle. And so you have a part of the midbrain that is below that, and a part that is above that. And so we're talking here at first with the tegmentum, we're talking about the part that is below. This first part, we're moving up, right? So you have a location there that is called the red nuclei. And some of the functions, and again, one of the things that's frustrating about the brain is that a lot of functions are shared. You don't say, this controls that. You say, well, this and this and this controls that. So we have places that have shared functions. And so the red nuclei are one of these. And this is one of these places which allow me to move my fingers in a very fine manner, or any kind of fine, what we call fine motor control. And if you think about where this thing is, well, I'm not going to go there. We'll just say the fine motor control is we have a nuclei. Now, a definition for you. We're going to talk about basal nuclei, and here I just used the term red nucleus. And what that means is we have nerve cell bodies there. So whenever we talk about a function, and we really are going to be and identify where it's located. Remember, we said these nerves, they're really long. So where are they located? Well, it's where the cell body is, where the soma is located. So we have a group of neurons there in this place that we call the red nuclei. And what does it do? It's involved in fine motor control. There are some other places like the basal nuclei that we'll talk about that are also involved in fine motor control. That we have something called the substantia nigra, which is right there near that. It's sort of below the red nuclei, the substantia nigra, and it is going to be sending inhibitory impulses. So we'd said fine motor control for the red nuclei. The substantia nigra is going to prevent unwanted body movements. So with all of these, how do we know what they do? Well, we know what they do sort of by subtraction. When you have an injury there, and you no longer are controlling something, you say, that must be in control of that. So when you have an injury to the substantia nigra, you get unwanted body movements. And so they now know that region is sending inhibitory signals to prevent unwanted body movements. So fine motor control, red nuclei, substantia nigra, keeping you from wiggling in an unwanted manner. And then we have surrounding that cerebral aqueduct. So surrounding the cerebral aqueduct there, going, connecting between the third and fourth ventricles, we have something called the central gray matter. And what does it do? It allows you to feel pain. Yay! It's important. It's important to know when you've got a problem. But that's where the pain signals are coming through there. So these are some of the structures in the midbrain. All right, so this is the part of the midbrain that's towards the pons. If you go away from the pons on the other side of the cerebral aqueduct, we have these 4 lobes, and they're called the corpora quadragemina, 2 pairs of lobes. And so all of these names are usually Latin-based, right? So corpus is body, quad is for, Gemini are babies. So 4 baby bodies or 4 dead babies, however you want to think of it. So we had said it really is, Gemini are twins. So we have 2 sets of twins, the superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. We have 4 lobes. The 2 higher ones are the superior colliculi, and the ones lower down are the other twin, the inferior colliculi. And some of these functions are really bizarre, I have to admit. So the superior colliculi allow my eyes to follow a fly, visual tracking. It's actually, has nothing to do with flies. But visual tracking is done through the superior colliculi, the 2 higher up lobes. And if you get a tap on your shoulder or you hear something behind you and you do that, that's from the superior colliculi. It allows you, how do we phrase it? It's a reflex for turning your head towards a tap or a noise. So that's 2 of the 4 babies. We then have the inferior colliculi, and it doesn't have anywhere near as interesting a function. It just receives signals from your inner ear. Now, your inner ear is functioning in two functions, balance and equilibrium, and hearing. So the inferior colliculi is involved with that. All right, we'll come back and we're going to talk about the reticular formation. So we're going to give some functions to all 3 of these brainstem regions.